So we're returning to Ezekiel again today, and chapters 29 and 30. And in some ways it's going to feel a little bit repetitive as we now just hear the same themes in some ways, but with a different nation in view. Yesterday it was Tyre, today it's Egypt. And whenever you read in God's word, and there is repetition, you do have to ask why. This is the God-breathed out revelation. Why would God choose to give us the whole of Ezekiel when we'd much prefer to read Philippians? And why is it so repetitive? And it helps us to think through too how we read. Sometimes books are very much to read chapter after chapter in quick succession because it's one phrase being repeated. I've learnt this as a preacher sometimes, preaching through Deuteronomy and the uncleanness laws, and there was something about skin and houses and clothing, and it's the same point being made 3 times, and if you do that over 4 or 5 weeks it gets pretty repetitive. It's a big picture stuff, but also because it's important. It's given that time and that coverage. And so as we think about God's judgment on Egypt now, let's deeply reflect on what God is wanting us to grasp from this. In the 10th year, in the 10th month, on the 12th day, the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, set your face against Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and prophesy against him and against all Egypt. Speak to him and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against you, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, you great monster, lying among your streams. You say, the Nile belongs to me, I made it for myself. But I will put hooks in your jaws and make the fish of your streams stick to your scales. I will pull you out from among your streams with all the fish sticking to your scales. I will leave you in the desert, you and all the fish of your streams. You will fall on the open field and not be gathered or picked up. I will give you as food to the beasts of the earth and the birds of the sky. Then all who live in Egypt will know that I am the Lord. You have been a staff of reed for the people of Israel. When they grasped you with their hands, you splintered and you tore open their shoulders. When they leaned on you, you broke and their backs were wrenched. It's a very powerful image. Basically, Israel had looked to Egypt for their security rather than the Lord, thinking that with Egypt's help they could defeat Babylon, and it had all gone wrong. And this horrible image then of leaning on a staff that then pierces the hand and the shoulder because it's not reliable is a graphic illustration of what Egypt has been to them. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I will bring a sword against you and kill both man and beast. Egypt will become a desolate wasteland. Then you will know that I am the Lord, because you said the Nile is mine, I made it. Therefore I am against you and against your streams, and I will make the land of Egypt a ruin and a desolate waste from Migdol to Aswan, as far as the border of Cush. The foot of neither man or beast will pass through it, no one will live there for 40 years. I will make the land of Egypt desolate among devastated lands, and her cities will lie desolate for 40 years among ruined cities. And I will disperse the Egyptians among the nations and scatter them through the countries. Yet this is what the sovereign Lord says, at the end of the 40 years I will gather the Egyptians from the nations where they were scattered. I will bring them back from captivity and return them to Upper Egypt, the land of their ancestry. There they will be a lowly kingdom. It will be the lowliest of kingdoms and will never again exalt itself above the other nations. I will make it so weak that it will never again rule over the nations. Egypt will no longer be a source of confidence for the people of Israel, but will be a reminder of their sin in turning to her for help. Then they will know that I am the sovereign Lord. Just pause there, a couple of things that have come out in that prophecy. The Lord keeps repeating this phrase, then you will know that I am the Lord. One of the problems is that we forget who is in control. And Egypt is taken to task, and God says he is against them because they have said that they've made themselves great. It's pride. There is a right order in our world. There is a God, a creator, to whom we owe our existence and therefore our worship. And if we begin to get above ourselves, he righteously and rightfully challenges that and will be against us where we are setting ourselves up against him. And he will show that he is the Lord. In the New Testament we've got the verse in Philippians that one day every knee will bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. He will get the honour due his name from everybody eventually. But in this world now he is working, and he is working against those who set themselves up. An important principle for us to remember. In the 27th year, in the 1st month of the 1st day, the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, drove his army in a hard campaign against Tyre. Every head was rubbed bare and every shoulder made raw. Yet he and his army got no reward from the campaign he led against Tyre. Therefore this is what the sovereign Lord says, I am going to give Egypt to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and he will carry off its wealth. He will loot and plunder the land as pay for his army. I will give him Egypt as a reward for his efforts, because he and his army did it for me, declares the sovereign Lord. On that day I will make a horn grow for the Israelites, and I will open your mouth among them. Then they will know that I am the Lord. So here's this strange prophecy that as Babylon invades and conquers Tyre and is now fighting Egypt, it's not just the random rules of war, but God is involved in these things as well. Babylon didn't get to take the plunder from Tyre, perhaps because it was a port city. It was able to export most of its wealth before it fell under siege, I don't know. But Nebuchadnezzar got no reward from the effort of conquering it. But as he goes to Egypt now, he is told he will get reward. The Lord is sovereign, and even disposing the wealth in war between pagan nations. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, prophesy and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says, wail and say, alas for that day, for the day is near, the day of the Lord is near, a day of clouds, a time of doom for the nations. A sword will come against Egypt, and anguish will come upon Cush. When the slain fall in Egypt, her wealth will be carried away, and her foundations torn down. Cush and Libya, Lydia and all Arabia, Cub and the people of the covenant land will fall by the sword along with Egypt. This is what the Lord says, the allies of Egypt will fall, and her proud strength will fail. From Migdol to Aswan they will fall by the sword within her, declares the sovereign Lord. They will be desolate among desolate lands, and their cities will lie among ruined cities. Then they will know that I am the Lord, when I set fire to Egypt, and all her helpers are crushed. On that day messengers will go out for me in ships to frighten Cush out of her complacently. Anguish will take hold of them on the day of Egypt's doom, for it is sure to come. This is what the sovereign Lord says, I will put an end to the hordes of Egypt by the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. He and his army, the most ruthless of nations, will be brought in to destroy the land. They will draw their swords against Egypt and fill the land with the slain. I will dry up the waters of the Nile and sell the land to an evil nation. By the hand of foreigners I will lay waste to the land and everything in it. I, the Lord, have spoken. This is what the sovereign Lord says, I will destroy the idols and put an end to the images in Memphis. No longer will there be a prince in Egypt, and I will spread fear throughout the land. I will lay waste Upper Egypt, set fire to Zoan, and inflict punishment on Thebes. I will pour out my wrath on Pelusium, the stronghold of Egypt, and wipe out the hordes of Thebes. I will set fire to Egypt. Pelusium will writhe in agony. Thebes will be taken by storm. Memphis will be in constant distress. The young men of Heliopolis and Bubastis will fall by the sword, and the cities themselves will go into captivity. Dark will be the day at Tahpanhes, when I break the yoke of Egypt. There her proud strength will come to an end. She will be covered with clouds, and her villages will go into captivity. So I will inflict punishment on Egypt, and they will know that I am the Lord. In the 11th year, in the first month of the 7th day, the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, I have broken the arm of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. It has not been bound up to be healed or put in a splint, so that it may become strong to hold a sword. Therefore this is what the sovereign Lord says, I am against Pharaoh, king of Egypt. I will break both his arms, the good one as well as the broken one, and make the sword fall from his hand. I will disperse the Egyptians among the nations, and scatter them through the countries. I will strengthen the arms of the king of Babylon, and put my sword in his hand, but I will break the arms of Pharaoh, and he will groan before me like a mortally wounded man. I will strengthen the arms of the king of Babylon, but the arms of Pharaoh will fall limp. Then they will know that I am the Lord, when I put my sword into the hand of the king of Babylon, and he brandishes it against Egypt. I will disperse the Egyptians among the nations, and scatter them through the countries. Then they will know that I am the Lord. So perhaps a warning that we need to take from this passage as we go out today, whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, is are you willingly bowing the knee to God, recognising that he is God and that you're not, and giving him his right due? Because if not, these passages warn us very clearly that he is set against us. He will humble us. He will remove our strength from us so that we learn our place. Ultimately, that on the day of Christ, that will determine our destiny, whether we have been those who have bowed to God, and therefore we will go to glory, or if not, we've continued in our treason, we will be cast out into everlasting darkness. How we set ourselves up against God in his rightful place will determine how God will treat us. And so we need to be humble. We need to be examining ourselves, watching out for pride. I love the quote from one of the Puritans, I can't remember which, and he wouldn't have quite put it like this, but he said, basically, your pride is like your underpants. It's the first thing you put on in the morning, it's the last thing you take on at night. It's genuinely a part of who we have become in our rebellion against God, and we are self-orientated, self-centered. We measure everything by ourselves, we've put ourselves at the centre. That's what pride is, and the Bible is the record of the long struggle between our human pride and God's rightful sovereignty. And how are we going to go into today? Is it with an acknowledgement of God as God, and gladly worshipping him and seeking to know his will and living for his glory, or is it in our pride? So there's the challenge. Here's the encouragement. When wicked people set themselves up in great power, to damage God's people, to set themselves against them when they rebel against God. They might look so impressive. Egypt was a mighty empire. The Nile, which is spoken of so often in these prophecies, meant that it was a wealthy place because of the rich water source that ran through it. And yet all of that was brought to nothing. God is able to bring down those powers. And so, Christian, maybe you're a little bit nervous today going out into a world that seems so supremely confident in its rebellion against God. We'll be encouraged. God is God. One day everyone will know that. And we need to live with that knowledge now, quietly, humbly, contentedly